Honey, do you know the story of Gideon?
Gideon? I'm not very sure. Wait, I think I've heard of his name, but if you are gonna ask me what's the story about, maybe I couldn't share the story.
Well, you might know Gideon's name because he was mentioned in Hebrews 11 in what they call the Hall of Faith. They're talking about these great acts that were done by faith. And that harkens back to Gideon, whose story is in Judges 6, 7, and 8.
Okay.
And Gideon came about in a time of a low point for Israel. The people of Israel had sinned in the sight of the Lord, and he had turned them over to the Midianites because they did not obey God. They did not obey him.
Okay.
And so they're hiding out in caves and hills, and they're getting raided all the time from the Midianites, and it's just a bad time.
Yeah.
And what happens is that God appears to Gideon, who is in a wine press shaking out like wheat. So a wine press, I believe, is like underground. So he's kind of hiding out. You know, normally you just do that out in the open, but he is hiding out away because he doesn't want to get raided by the Midianites. He doesn't want to make himself a target. So God comes before him and says, you know, hey, I've chosen you. And Gideon says something like, if God brought us out of Egypt, but you've forsaken us, and, you know, where's our miracles now? When are these things going to happen for us now? And God says to him, you are a great warrior, and you will overtake the Midianites down to the last man.
Okay.
And Gideon's like, what? God, I'm from the weakest tribe. I'm from Manasseh. And I'm the weakest family, and I'm the weakest in my family. And he says, surely I will be with you as you do this thing.
Wait, why do you think God chose Gideon even though he sees himself as weak and insignificant?
I think because God knew his heart is probably one factor of it. And then the other factor comes in later in the verse, because what we know is that God wants to deliver Israel, and he wants to make it clear that it is only done by the power of God.
Okay.
So Gideon does something that we're really not supposed to do. He says, God, I need to test you. I need to make sure you're real. And he comes and he brings an offering before the Lord, and the Lord shows that he is real to him. And he says something to Gideon. He says, go to your father's house and tear down the altars to Baal and the Asherah pole.
Oh, okay.
So this is the altar that the whole community had used to Baal. This is where, when we start the verse, we see Israel has fallen out of favor with God because of stuff like this. So Gideon knows that once he does this, like, his life is at risk. So he goes in the middle of the night and he tears down the altar and he burns the pole, and he puts an offering on the Asherah pole. The people of his town come to him and they're like, hey, who did this? Who burned the altar down? And Gideon's father steps forward for him and says, if Baal is real, let him contend with Gideon. Otherwise, leave him alone. And from that moment forth, they call him Jerubbaal, which means that Baal contends with. And that's kind of a common theme in the Old Testament, is God giving people a new name.
Okay.
So God's telling Midian, hey, I need you to go against the Midianites. And he says, well, how do I know this is real? How can I know this is real? So he says something, again, which he really shouldn't do. This story is how it happened. It's not necessarily something for us to do. He says, God, give me a sign. God has already spoken to him. God has already proved his way to him. But he says, God, give me a sign. I'm going to put this fleece, which is like a wool blanket or a wool rug. I'm going to take it. I'm going to put it outside. And I want the ground to be dry, but I want the wool fleece to be wet. Okay. So he goes to bed. He wakes up in the morning, and the wool fleece has so much water in it, he's able to wring it out into a bowl. So God answered his sign. He says, oh, hold on. One more sign, God. One more sign. And then he says, I want the ground to be wet, but I want the fleece to be dry.
Oh.
So God reverses it, and the ground is wet with dew, and the fleece is dry. So he's convinced. And if you've ever stepped on a welcome mat after the morning, and you have like just your socks on, those things are soaking wet.
Yeah.
So you know it's kind of like they're always the last thing to dry. And this would be true for the fleece too. So you know that God had answered him in that moment. So he says, you need to go down and take care of the Midianites. And Gideon was able to get 32,000 people. God says, that's too many people. 32,000 is too many. Tell anybody who wants to go home, they can go home. So he sends them all away. 22,000 people are away. Then he says, 10,000 is still too many. I need you to test these people. So I need you to take them down to the river and separate them. Those who scoop the bowl up, the water up, and drink it like a dog, put in one group, and those who like bend down and drink it, put in another group. So the people who scooped it up in their hands was only 300.
Oh, wow.
And God says, use those people.
Wait, how many enemies are there?
Well, the Midianites had 135,000 people.
Oh, wow. 135,000?
Yes. So what?
Versus 300?
Versus 300. So what God is saying to him is, and to the people of Israel, is this will not be done by your might. It will be done by my might. Because only by the divine intervention could 300 best 135,000.
For sure.
So at this point, Gideon has his army, and God says, you can go down and I will deliver them to you. But if you're scared, you can go down tonight. Take a servant, go down tonight to the camp. And so Gideon goes down to the camp, and he overhears soldiers in the camp talking about a dream they had, that they fell by the sword of Gideon.
Okay.
So after Gideon overheard this, he's like, all right, I'm ready. Let's go. So he devises a plan. He splits the 300 up into 3 groups, and he gives them torches and pots. And he has them go in at night, like pots, like clay pots and torches. He has them go at night, and he has them smash the pots and light the torches. So he surrounded the camp of Midian.
Okay.
And the Midianites were awoken and startled by this. They thought they were completely surrounded, and they panicked, and they fled, and they fought each other, and they killed each other, and they fled from Manasseh. They fled from the Israelites. And actually, the verse goes on, and I would encourage anybody to continue reading it, because we see more about the state of Israel at this time. But what happens is that Gideon is successful over the Midianites. He delivers Israel from the boot of the Midianites. He brings peace to the land as he rules as their 5th judge for 40 years.
Oh, wow. That was amazing.
So that story is telling us, because remember we said Gideon is part of the Hall of Faith. So we see that there are times when Gideon's faith is not strong, but I think most normal people would not have strong faith in that circumstance.
Yeah.
And what the Bible is telling us, at least in that situation, is speak that out. Ask questions of the Lord. Because if you're feeling that, he knows anyway, and it's better to talk about it than to stamp it down and try to ignore it. But we also see that Gideon tore down the altar of Baal with faith that God would deliver him. And he also attacked the Midianites, who outnumbered him 300 to 135,000, which is an amazing show of God's power and faithfulness.
Yeah. Like, that was really amazing. And I'm very curious, like, if you were one of the soldiers of Gideon, like one of the 300, and you'd learn about just bringing pots and, what's the other one? Torch?
Yeah.
Like, how would you feel? Like, would you be scared or?
I think there were doubts, but you also consider that God had Gideon send home 22,000 to begin with. And God selected those 300. Like, he knew who it was. So I think that it's reasonable to read that and understand God selected those 300, and that is men of faith and men that could pursue that call. So they were probably scared, but there's a measure of faith there for them too. They could see the amount of soldiers they were going up against.
Yeah.
And what a powerful moment it was when they saw them scatter and turn on each other and run away. So, like I said, that is in Judges 6, 7, and 8, the full story of Gideon. There's some stuff we didn't really talk about as much. So I definitely encourage everybody to read it.
Yeah, and I remember this movie, I'm not sure what the title is, but it's like 300. They were really huge men, like warriors. Do you think that was related to the story of Gideon?
I don't really think it's related. It may be a lot of times stories from the ancient times form one another, but you know, that story from ancient Greece was them specifically fighting off a large army in a narrow bottleneck.
Yeah, I saw that.
Whereas, you know, this is about army in an open camp that they had surrounded and God had fooled into destroying themselves. So I think that one is about this celebration of man and the other is about God, which is exactly why God had done it the way that he did it. He did not want them to think it was done by their own power, but by his power.
So thank you so much, dear, for sharing the story of Gideon. I really appreciate you for doing that. And so if you want to learn more about the life of Gideon, then please do check the link that we're gonna add in the description box. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time. Bye!